The sky bled orange over the coast as she adjusted the delicate silver chain around her neck, rehearsing her smile in the reflection of the car window. He had said it so casually, "It's just a family dinner." Yet something inside her fluttered with unease. The invitation had come suddenly, the tone oddly formal. As she stepped through the glass doors of the seaside mansion, her heels clicked like tiny warning bells on marble floors. Laughter echoed ahead, too bright, too rehearsed. Faces turned, eyes darted, whispers slipped like smoke, and then she saw him, standing beneath a chandelier, his hand gripping another woman's waist. The applause burst before her mind caught up with her eyes. Confetti, rings, champagne. Her world crumbled in a single heartbeat. What would you do if the man you loved threw a surprise engagement to someone else? And what if that someone else was your best friend? Her breath caught in her throat as the crowd's cheers blurred into white noise. Every detail sharpened, the flicker of candles, the rhythm of the sea outside, the faint tremor in her hands. He didn't even look surprised to see her there. His gaze met hers for a split second, then drifted away as if she were just another guest. The weight of betrayal crushed her chest, but her body refused to move. Around her, whispers began, soft, pitying, poisonous. She had loved him enough to overlook the red flags, the late calls, the secretive smiles. Now those fragments pieced together into something monstrous. She forced a smile, her lips trembling as she moved through the guests, pretending not to notice their glances. Every face seemed rehearsed, every cheer choreographed. She found herself standing near the buffet, hands shaking as she poured a drink, just to feel something steady. A familiar voice called her name, Daniel's. His presence steadied her heart for a moment. His eyes said everything. "You don't deserve this." But before she could answer, a photographer shouted for everyone to gather for a group picture. The perfect snapshot of a perfect lie. The photographer called for families, and Margaret insisted on pulling Lena closer, an act of cruel politeness. The flash went off, freezing the falseness forever. Lena's heart pounded like thunder. She wanted to scream, to run, to vanish into the waves outside. But she stayed. Every second was a blade cutting deeper. Somewhere inside, a quiet strength began to stir. Not forgiveness, but fury. The party music swelled as laughter filled the air again, but she slipped toward the terrace, needing air. The ocean stretched endlessly before her, moonlight slicing through restless waves. Behind her, she heard his voice. The one she once trusted, now venom wrapped in silk. "You weren't supposed to be here tonight." The words hung in the air, cold and deliberate. She turned slowly, her eyes meeting his. The truth burned between them, raw and unforgivable. The night air stung like betrayal. Her reflection shimmered in the glass door as he stepped closer, voice low and careful, the way liars speak when their mask is slipping. He whispered excuses, how it was complicated, how she had misunderstood. But his words stumbled, his eyes refused to meet hers. She felt her pulse race not from heartbreak anymore, but from disbelief. Inside, laughter and music carried on as though her world hadn't just ended. When he finally said, "You were never meant to find out this way," the last piece of her trust shattered. She turned to leave, but his hand caught her wrist, gentle, pleading. The same hand that had just placed a ring on another. She yanked her wrist free and walked inside, straight into a wave of congratulations meant for someone else. The music dulled to a low hum in her ears. Maya spotted her, eyes widening just enough to betray guilt before her lips curved into a polished smile. Their gazes met across the room, years of friendship hanging like broken glass between them. Lena wanted to ask why, how long, when it began, but words caught in her throat. Every shared memory now felt poisoned. A photographer brushed past her, and flash after flash painted the room in white lies. Margaret approached her with that same measured grace, the kind that hides cruelty beneath etiquette. "You mustn't take things so personally, dear," she murmured, guiding her toward the buffet as if soothing a child. "Ethan has always followed his heart." The words were daggers wrapped in velvet. Lena's chest tightened as she realized this wasn't a shock to the family. It was orchestrated. Every glance, every smile tonight had been part of a performance. The perfect family image required her humiliation as the price. But Margaret didn't see her breaking. She saw her silencing. That, Lena decided, would never happen again. A sudden voice cut through the chatter. Daniels. He stepped forward, glass in hand, pretending to toast. His eyes burned with quiet defiance. "To honesty," he said loudly enough for the crowd to hush. "And to those who deserve better than lies." Gasps followed. Ethan stiffened. Maya's smile faltered. For the first time, Lena didn't feel alone in that glittering room of betrayal. People began to murmur, confusion rippling through the guests. Margaret's face froze into polite horror. The facade was cracking, and Daniel had given her a spark to breathe again. The guests began dispersing toward the garden as whispers spread like wildfire. She followed Daniel outside, her steps finally steady. "You didn't have to do that," she said softly. He smiled, eyes gentle but fierce. "Someone needed to." The night was thick with tension and salt air. Behind them, inside the glowing mansion, Ethan and Maya's laughter had turned brittle. Lena looked up at the stars, her pain cooling into purpose. This wasn't the end of her story, not yet. Tonight had broken her heart, but it had also opened her eyes. Morning light crept through her curtains, slicing across her sleepless face. The echoes of last night refused to fade. The applause, the ring, his empty eyes. She replayed every memory like a cruel film. The secret texts, the sudden silences, the excuses wrapped in charm. And now she knew why. Her phone buzzed with messages she couldn't bear to open. Sympathy from strangers, silence from him. One notification caught her eye, a tagged post. A photo of Ethan and Maya, smiling, captioned, "She said yes." Her heart twisted, but as she looked closer, she noticed something chilling. She was in the background, blurred but visible, eyes wide, standing like a ghost in her own story. Her fingers trembled as she scrolled through the comments. Hearts, congratulations, hashtags. No one knew the truth. She threw the phone aside, pacing the room as anger replaced the ache. Every lie he told, every promise whispered in the dark, played back in her mind until it burned. She opened the drawer where his letters still lay, folded neatly, smelling faintly of the cologne she once loved. With one deep breath, she began reading them again. Not as love notes, but as evidence. In every word she now saw manipulation disguised as affection. Her phone rang, Daniel's name. His voice was cautious, knowing she hadn't slept. "You need to see something," he said. Minutes later, an email arrived, a forwarded thread of messages between Ethan and Maya from months ago. Plans, secrets, a line that froze her blood. "Shall find out eventually. But by then it won't matter." Her chest tightened as truth settled heavy in her lungs. The betrayal wasn't just emotional. It was rehearsed, orchestrated like a play. She felt sick. Yet, beneath the heartbreak, something sharper began to grow. Resolve. She drove to the coastal cafe where they first met, the place that once smelled like fresh pastries and beginnings. Today it reeked of endings. Sitting in the same corner booth, she stared at the seat across from her, empty now, but haunted by his laughter. She replayed their first dinner, remembering the way he looked at her like she was the only one in the room. Now she wondered how many times he'd practiced that same look on someone else. The truth was cruel but freeing. He had loved the idea of her, not her soul. And she would never let anyone turn her into a secret again. Just as she was about to leave, her phone buzzed again. This time, a message from Maya, 26. "Can we talk?" The audacity made her laugh, but curiosity pulled at her. Moments later, she saw her through the window, standing outside, dressed in plain clothes, no diamonds, no smile. Maya's eyes looked haunted. Against her better judgment, Lena opened the door. The tension between them was suffocating. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," Maya whispered. "He lied to both of us." The truth flickered in her eyes. Fear, regret, guilt. And suddenly, Lena realized something terrifying. The real story had just begun. The cafe door swung shut behind them, sealing them in a fragile silence. Rain began to fall, soft at first, then heavy, the kind that feels like confession. Maya sat across from Lena, hands trembling around a cup she didn't drink from. "He told me you were gone," she whispered. "That you left him months ago." Lena felt the words slice through her. Maya's mascara streaked as she spoke faster, desperate to be understood. "He said I was the only one. That you moved on." Every syllable sounded like a wound reopening. The betrayal had layers: deceit, manipulation, control. Yet, as the truth unfolded, Lena realized they were both victims of the same man's cruelty. The cafe door opened again, and a familiar voice shattered the uneasy calm. Ethan walked in, soaked, breathless, eyes darting between them. "So this is where you ran off to?" he said, with forced composure. His confidence had cracks now, visible under the fluorescent hum. Lena rose, spine straight, voice steady. "You told her I left you. You told me she was just a friend. Which one of us was the practice?" The words hit him harder than any slap could. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the rain seemed to pause. Maya's eyes filled with tears again. Not for him, but for the truth she'd refused to see until now. "Don't do this here," Ethan muttered, glancing at the few onlookers pretending not to watch. Lena stepped closer. "No. Let's do it right here, where the truth can finally breathe." Her words carried a calm fury. Maya looked between them, realization dawning. "You lied to both of us," she whispered, voice shaking. Ethan's jaw tightened. "I did what I had to." The phrase hung in the air, grotesque in its simplicity. For years he had controlled the narrative, made them question their worth, their sanity. But now, under the weight of their stares, his charm collapsed like glass underfoot. Margaret's voice suddenly echoed from the doorway, sharp and cold. She had followed him, her umbrella dripping water onto the tiles. "Enough," she said, tone cutting through the tension. "You're embarrassing yourself." Ethan's eyes flickered with panic. Lena turned to face her, no longer afraid. "Embarrassment isn't the problem," she said softly. "It's the silence that protected him." Margaret's stare faltered. For the first time, her composure cracked, guilt glinting through the mask. "You don't know everything," she muttered, looking at her son. But Lena's voice rose above the hum of rain. "No, but now everyone will." The cafe fell silent except for the rain tapping against the windows. Ethan took a step forward, his voice breaking for the first time. "You don't understand. I was trying to fix everything." Lena shook her head slowly, a calm resolve washing over her. "You can't fix what you shattered." Maya stood beside her now, silent but solid. The three of them stood in a line, past, present, and consequence. Ethan's charm, once magnetic, now looked hollow under the cold light. He opened his mouth, but no words came. For the first time, he looked small. Outside, thunder rolled, like applause for the truth finally spoken. By the next morning, the story had escaped the cafe and spread like fire. Someone had filmed the confrontation. The trembling voices, the accusations, the truth. It was everywhere now. On phones, in whispers, in the eyes of everyone who had once envied their perfect love. Lena sat on her couch, watching herself on screen, her own heartbreak now a headline. The woman who walked into her boyfriend's engagement, she almost laughed through the ache. But something inside her shifted. The shame that once burned was gone. In its place was something new. Strength. She hadn't lost control. She'd taken it back, even if the world had to see her pain to believe it was real. Across town, Ethan faced the fallout. His company inbox overflowed, his calls unanswered. The sponsors who once adored his polished image now ghosted him. The ring that once symbolized triumph lay forgotten on the counter, glinting cold under morning light. Maya sat opposite him, her eyes red from sleeplessness. "They're calling me a homewrecker," she whispered. He didn't respond. His silence was no longer power. It was defeat. He reached for her hand, but she pulled away. For the first time, she saw him for what he truly was. A man who built love like a business and ruined it just as easily. Daniel arrived at Lena's door later that afternoon, carrying groceries instead of flowers. "You haven't eaten," he said gently. She smiled faintly, letting him in. His kindness felt like quiet sunlight after endless rain. They cooked together in silence, the rhythm of chopping vegetables grounding her. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady. "I thought love meant forgiveness," she said softly. "Now I know it means boundaries." Daniel nodded, his eyes full of something unspoken, not pity, but respect. For the first time in days, she laughed. A small sound, but real, and it echoed through the space like healing. The next evening, Maya appeared at Lena's door, her eyes swollen, hands empty. "I ended it," she said before Lena could speak. Her voice was hoarse, stripped of vanity. "He told me he loved me while texting you." The words hung heavy, but there was no satisfaction in them, only exhaustion. Lena studied her for a moment, then nodded. "I don't hate you," she said. "I hate what he made us both believe." Maya broke down, sobbing into the shoulder of the woman she once betrayed. Outside, the world still talked, still gossiped. But in that small apartment, forgiveness began quietly, not for him, but for themselves. Days later, Margaret appeared at the cafe, alone this time, her polished exterior dulled by sleepless nights. Lena watched her approach, unsure what to expect. "He's gone," Margaret said quietly. "He left the city." "The press won't stop calling." There was no pride left in her voice, only fatigue. "You warned me once," she whispered. "And I didn't listen." Lena simply nodded. She didn't need revenge. The truth had already done its work. As Margaret left, Lena turned toward the window, sunlight breaking through after weeks of storms. For the first time, she felt peace. Not because it was over, but because she finally knew her worth. Weeks passed, and the storm that had once consumed every corner of her life began to fade into distant echoes. Yet, the city still whispered his name. Not with admiration now, but pity. News outlets published exposés, unearthing how Ethan's relationships blurred into business deals, and how manipulation was his quiet talent. Lena watched it all unfold with detached calm. She no longer flinched at his face on screens. It was just another story now, one she had outgrown. The world saw the villain. She saw the closure. Sitting by the sea, wind in her hair, she realized something profound. Peace doesn't arrive with an apology. It arrives when you stop waiting for one. Meanwhile, Ethan's world unraveled. His investors withdrew, his reputation shattered under the weight of truth. Once surrounded by admirers, he now sat alone in a dim apartment, the same arrogance that once fueled him now curdling into regret. He replayed the video. Her words, her calm defiance, her refusal to break. For the first time, he saw himself through her eyes, not as the hero of his own story, but as the villain of hers. The silence was unbearable. He reached for his phone, hovered over her name, but stopped. She had already answered in the only way that mattered, by moving on. Lena spent her afternoons sketching again, her old passion abandoned long ago in the name of love. Her apartment filled with drawings of waves, hands, faces she'd once feared forgetting. Daniel visited often, sometimes bringing food, sometimes just quiet company. There were no declarations, no grand gestures, only ease. She caught him studying one of her sketches and smiled. "You're getting good again," he said. "No," she replied softly. "I'm getting me again." The words hung like sunlight through glass, fragile but warm. For the first time in months, her heart didn't ache when she breathed. One afternoon, Maya joined her by the sea. They stood side by side, silent for a long time. I got a new job," Maya said at last. "Far away. I need to start over." Lena nodded, eyes fixed on the horizon. "Then start clean," she replied. There was no bitterness, no resentment left, only understanding born from shared pain. They both knew forgiveness didn't erase the past. It simply freed them from carrying it forward. As they parted, the tide rushed over their footprints, erasing every trace of where they'd stood. A quiet mercy from the ocean itself. Later that evening, Lena stood on her balcony, city lights flickering like distant stars. She opened her journal, the one she once filled with dreams of weddings and forever promises, and began to write again. But this time, her words weren't for someone else. They were for her. For the woman who walked into heartbreak and came out stronger. For the girl who had confused silence with love. For the soul that had finally learned that endings aren't punishments, they're protection. As the night wind whispered through the city, she smiled, feeling the weight finally lift. The story that had broken her was no longer her ending. It was her beginning. Months later, the world had moved on. But Lena, 27, had not forgotten. She had transformed. Her art exhibition opened in the same coastal gallery where she once dreamed of wedding photos. The theme was simple, yet raw. What love leaves behind. Each canvas was a confession in color. Heartbreak, betrayal, and rebirth. Painted in shades of salt and sunlight. Guests whispered her name in admiration, unaware of how those paintings were once pieces of her pain. At the center of the room hung her final piece, a faceless couple standing under confetti, the woman walking away while everyone else cheered. This time, the applause was hers. Daniel, 30, appeared near the end of the evening, hands tucked into his pockets, pride glimmering in his eyes. "You turned pain into beauty," he said softly. She smiled, shaking her head. "No," she replied. "I turned it into truth." Their silence after that said everything. Two souls who didn't need to rush what was already real. He stayed beside her as the night faded, the sound of the waves beyond the glass walls blending with the murmured praise around them. It was peaceful, not perfect, but real. And that was enough. Across the city, Ethan, 29, sat in a small cafe, the same one that once held his downfall. The TV above the counter showed coverage of the gallery opening, his name mentioned only as the ex who inspired the art. The barista didn't recognize him, and that anonymity stung more than the headlines. He looked out the window, watching rain fall on the same streets where he once felt untouchable. Now he was just a man among strangers, haunted not by loss, but by the realization that the only person who ever truly saw him no longer cared to look. Weeks later, Maya, 26, sent Lena a postcard, a simple photograph of a new city skyline with the words, "Thank you for letting me start again." Lena placed it on her wall, not as a reminder of pain, but as proof of growth. Some wounds didn't close perfectly. They simply stopped hurting. She traced the edge of the postcard and whispered to herself, "We survived him." Outside, the ocean murmured softly, carrying away everything that once drowned her. There was peace in the simplicity of it. No revenge, no bitterness, just release. One golden evening, she returned to the seaside mansion, the place where her story had shattered. It stood silent now, hosting another event. Strangers laughing where her heart once broke. She stood at the gates, breathing deeply, then smiled and walked away. No tears, no trembling, just freedom. The past no longer owned her. It merely shaped her. As she reached the beach, she turned to the horizon. Waves glinting, sky ablaze with sunset, and whispered to herself. He said it was just a family dinner. But it was the beginning of finding myself. And with that, she stepped forward, each footprint a promise of new beginnings.